Today I'm going to be sewing the new Tilly and the Buttons Marnie dress using this gorgeous Atelier Brunette viscose twill that was in September's Luxury SewHayleyJane boxes. Hello everyone, I hope you're doing really well. Welcome back to my channel. I am super excited that today is a sewing day and I am making the autumn dress of dreams. In September, the Luxury SewHayleyJane boxes included the brand new Tilly and the Buttons Marnie dress, and I'm planning to sew it up using the gorgeous, stunning Atelier Brunette viscose twill. It's called Twig in this gorgeous ochre colour, and both of them came in the luxury honey themed SewHayleyJane boxes. If you want to look a bit more into those boxes, you can check out the video a couple of weeks ago. But yes, today is a sewing day. So in terms of the pattern, I've decided to make the dress without any of the frills and tucks. Because I'm a bit bigger busted, I find I don't really want too much extra stuff going on over here. So I'm just going for the simple dress version. I have lengthened it a little bit. And because it's so swishy and my body sizes fall between a size 7 at the bust, a 9 at the waist and an 11 at the hips, but there's so much ease, so I've just sewn a size 7 at the bust and then graded out to an 8. That still gives me about 10 inches of ease around the hips, so I think I'm pretty happy with that. Although I don't normally go for high collar dresses and tops, I quite like this idea because it means I can put a long sleeved thermal vest on underneath with the big sleeves as well, wear it with tights and boots and a snuggly cardigan, and I'm so excited. This is just like autumn in a dress. So let's get cracking. So the first step is to stay stitch around the front and back necklines, which I have already done here, and on the back yokes here. And then we're going to fold by 5mm the back openings, and then 5mm again, and then top stitch down that edge there. So that's the first step. So the pattern is closed at the back with a button and button loop. This is the teeny tiny button loop piece, which has been folded in half, and then those raw edges have been folded into the center and then closed up, and then I'm just going to top stitch those raw edges down so that it's just one nice long piece, and then attach it to the left back piece. The next step is to sew the front and back yoke pieces together and the front and back side panel pieces together to create the shoulder seam here. So we're just going to pin those together and stitch and then overlock them finished. In terms of sizing, this dress has a lot of ease in the hips. My sizing puts me at a size 7 at the bust, a 9 at the waist and a 11 at the hips. But because it's such a swishy, floaty dress, I decided to sew a size 7 at the bust and then just grade out to an 8 at the hips, which still gives me a good 10 inches of ease to swing around my hips. So I am hopefully pretty happy with that, and that will be enough. next step is to trim 1 centimetre or 10 millimetres off of the neckline edge. I'm kind of eyeballing this. I have got this tape measure out, but I'm sort of eyeballing it against where I did the stay stitching earlier. And then the next bit is to attach the bias binding to the neckline. So I'm attaching the bias binding to the neckline now. If I open this up, you can see I've started at the center front and then taken it around the side to make sure I've got the same amount of bias binding left over at the edges. So I'm going to do the same again on this side. So with the bias binding, you just open up the bias binding and then make sure you pin so that the raw edge of the bias binding is pinned to the raw edge of the neckline. And then we're going to sew along this first fold all the way along here. It's one of the thinnest and most fiddly pieces of bias binding I've ever used. So I'm going to take it really slow. So the next step was to trim the seam allowance of the neckline only, not the binding, and then I'm just understitching the binding to the seam allowances, just gently pulling the binding away from the yoke neckline pieces as I go. So we've got something that looks a little bit like this so far. So the next stage, before I stop for lunch, is to fold. I might just trim these tails off a little bit and fold them in. And then using the iron, I'm going to fold the binding to the inside of the neckline, just rolling it ever so slightly. And this is what the understitching helps to do. It helps to roll the binding so that the sewn edge of the binding will be tucked inside the neckline, and then I will stitch that down along the second folded edge of the binding. So it would be just along here, but I'm going to top stitch it and I'm going to take it really, really carefully, because this is the bit that quite often when I sew bias binding I miss. I just don't quite catch little pieces of the binding, so I need to take that bit really slowly. So I'm going to go to the iron next. The neckline binding is all finished now, and the next stage is to attach the centre front and the centre back panels to the yoke pieces, and that is by gathering the centre panels. So I put a different colour thread into the top thread of my machine, like you can see here. This makes it easier to spot when it comes to unpicking those gathering stitches later. Now, Tilly and the Buttons suggests using 3 lines of gathering stitches. If you're a beginner, then I would definitely do that, but I tend to just do 2. So they're gathered up, pinned together, all nice and straight, and then I'm going to sew at 5/8 of an inch, which is in between the 2 gathering stitches that I've done here. So with the back yoke pieces, we're going to gather the centre panel to it. We need to make sure that these 2 edges are flush against each other as we sew. Just take it easy, make sure that they are together. Find your centre point of your centre back panel and make sure that that's lined up with the centre of the back yoke pieces. making sure that they're like touching, making sure they're kissing. Okay, so the gathering is all done now. The next stage is to overlock because this is a fabric that frays quite a lot. To save time, I also skipped ahead to the stage where you have to gather or sew the gathering stitches of the sleeve head and the lower sleeve piece before re-threading my machine in the usual colour. So those bits is just a little like save time step. Just have a read through your instructions and see if there's anything that you can do in a batch. So I'm going to overlock these now and press them, and then I'm going to have to probably leave it there for today because I have to go pick up my daughter from school. So sewing day number 2 will be tomorrow. Welcome back to day 2 of sewing. Firstly, I apologise for the lack of continuity. Obviously I have different clothes and I've had my hair cut. What can I say? Secondly, I just want to say, please don't watch this and think that it's been 2 full days of sewing. This hasn't taken me 16 hours to make. I probably did about 3 hours of sewing yesterday, and I imagine this will take another 2 or 3 hours to get this finished now. So it's not a super long project. It's going fairly smoothly and I'm happy with how it's coming together. I did take home these pieces and unpicked those gathering stitches whilst watching TV last night. So that's that job out of the way and done. So now I can crack on and add the side panels to the front and center bodice panels. So that is where I'm up to now. When you're ready to attach the side panel to the main bit of the bodice, make sure that you take note of your notches. So on the side panel, you have the armhole seam and the double notches show that that would be the back. So make sure that that is on the back, and then you've got the single notch here to show the front. Now, attaching the side panel to the bodice, particularly along the front, you're going to need to use quite a few pins because you're attaching a curve to another curve. So there's a little bit of easing involved. It's not too bad, but just use lots of pins and take it really slowly when you sew. So I'm going to start at one end and I'm just going to sew all the way along this seam, which goes from the back hem all the way across the shoulder and down to the front hem. The side panels are now sewn on in place, but before I go over to the overlocker to finish them, I'm going to save a little bit of time by stitching up the 2 side seams first, and then I'll overlock all 4 of those seams that I've just sewn at the same time and go and press them. Saves a little bit of backwards and forwards. It's just a little bit of a little time saver tip for you. So the side seams next, matching up any notches as you go. time to insert the sleeves now. So we have 2 sleeves, obviously. These are all prepared. So I've attached the bishop sleeve bit and done the gathering here, and I've sewn up the underarm seam as well. So to insert the sleeves, we need it to go from this to this before we actually do any sewing. So to insert the sleeve, make sure you've got the right sleeve for the right side of your bodice using your double notches as a guide. Turn your sleeve the right way out and then insert it through the armhole. And start by matching up the underarm seam to the side seam of the bodice and pop a pin in there. Then match up your notches. So you've got the single notch at the front of the sleeve and the double notch at the back. So pop some pins in along the underarm of the sleeve first, and then we will gather up those gathering stitches to make the sleeve head fit into the armhole of the bodice. So once you've pinned the underarms from the notches down, you next need to find a notch that you made in the very top of the sleeve head, which matches up to the shoulder seam. Pop a pin in there. And then find your bobbin threads and just gently pull on them to gather the sleeve head into the armhole. It doesn't take much gathering, just a little bit. So you're going to end up with this sort of lettucing here because obviously it's bigger, but as long as you make sure that where your seam allowance is going to be is lying flush to the bodice, and then pop loads of pins in, you're good to go. Once you've got all your pins in, you can take it over to the sewing machine and take it really slowly. I tend to do the terrible thing and leave the pins in as I'm sewing, especially when there's any amount of gathering. It just helps to keep the fabric in place. So obviously take it really slowly if you're going to do that so that you don't break your sewing machine needle. Okay, so we are on the last step. I have already hemmed the dress, so the last thing that I need to do is finish off the sleeves by attaching or threading through a 1 centimeter wide piece of elastic that I measured around my wrist and then added 1.5 inches for the seam allowance. And we're going to thread it through here. So I have hemmed the sleeve and left about a 2-3 centimeter opening there. You need 2 safety pins, and we're going to start by threading it through threading it through the hole in one direction. Just guiding the safety pin all the way around. And then before you lose this end, we're going to get another safety pin. And we are going to just attach it to the seam allowance of the sleeve so that we don't lose it. And then just keep threading the elastic through the channel as per Tilly's instructions. Once you've made the elastic go all the way through, we're going to remove both the safety pins, keeping a really tight hold of the ends. Pull them out a little bit and overlap them, and then very carefully, it's really fiddly, just use the sewing machine to stitch those ends together. As you can see, I just stitched that together by going forwards and backwards a few times. Now we're going to pull that through, and then we're going to just stitch the last bit of that hem down in the middle, making sure that the ends of your elastic are lying nice and flat. Give it a bit of a stretch just to disperse the elastic evenly around the sleeve, and that's done. The last stage then is to attach the button. I'm going to use one of these gorgeous buttons that Liz Harry designed for the honey themed boxes. That this fabric and this pattern and the elastic actually that I've just used was all included in the boxes. So I have got some thread coming through already just by lining up the top edge and figuring out where the button loop's going to go. And then I'm just going to sew on the button. Hopefully it's not too heavy for this fabric. All finished. Hopefully that button goes through okay. Yes, it does. I forgot to check that. Okay, I'm gonna go give this a final press and then I will try it on. Fingers crossed. This is a exciting but also scary bit. Okay, all finished. Here it is. I like it. It's a really different style of dress for me. I don't tend to wear stuff that's high neck or that completely hides my shape. And I found that I need to wear like a little vest top or something underneath because this bit kind of folds into my cleavage, if that makes sense, if I don't have a bit of fabric sort of going across my boobs. But I love it. I love the dress. I love how simple it was to fit up. It fits really well in terms of the ease around my hips. And yeah, I think I'm gonna experiment with a few different ways of wearing it, put a belt around it, that kind of thing. And yeah, I think I like it, but it's very different to me. And I feel like with the high neckline and the slight sort of puffiness of the sleeves and my curly hair, I feel a little bit like Farrah Fawcett, very sort of 70s. I might be wrong. Let me know what you think. Nicely, obviously, would be appreciated. And yeah, I think I like it, but I need to do some experimenting with how to wear it. Thank you so much everyone for watching. Give this video a like, a thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed, subscribe. I'm also planning on doing a Q&A video next week, so if you have any questions that you would like to ask, pop them in the comments below as well. See you all really soon. Bye.